What if I told you that what truly belongs to you is already on its way? That the opportunities, relationships, and experiences aligned with your essence are moving toward you whether or not you chase them? This statement may sound paradoxical in a world that constantly tells us to run faster, to compete harder, and to never stop striving. Yet psychology, philosophy, and the lived experience of countless individuals suggest that there's a deeper, more profound truth hidden behind this idea. The question is not whether life has something for you, but whether you are prepared to receive it. Carl Jung, one of the most influential thinkers of the 20th century, introduced the concept of synchronicity. He defined it as meaningful coincidence, a phenomenon where external events align with our inner state in ways that defy logical explanation. This is not a mystical escape from responsibility, but a psychological reality. When your unconscious conflicts remain unresolved, they project themselves into your choices and your encounters. Conversely, when you begin to integrate your inner life, the world outside begins to mirror that transformation. This is why Jung insisted that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Consider how often we cling to relationships, jobs, or identities that ultimately slip away despite our desperate attempts to hold them. At the time, these losses feel like punishments or failures. But with hindsight, many realize that these endings were necessary, clearing space for something more authentic. Behavioral psychology supports this pattern. Individuals who persist in clinging to unsustainable goals tend to experience higher levels of distress, while those who engaged in adaptive disengagement, accepting loss, and redirecting their energy are more likely to encounter opportunities that truly fit their skills and values. The story of Elena illustrates this shift. For years, she chased love in ways that left her depleted. Her strategy was based on fear of loneliness, fear of inadequacy, fear of being unchosen. As long as fear dictated her actions, she attracted relationships that confirmed her deepest insecurity. It was only when she stopped running, turned inward, and began to address her own shadow, the parts of herself she had neglected or denied, that her relational dynamics shifted. This was not luck. It was alignment. In Jungian terms, she became the fertile ground upon which synchronicity could manifest. The lesson is, strategic chasing with anxiety often ensures failure because it blinds you to the subtle signals of alignment. To use Jung's metaphor, pursuing life is like running after a butterfly. The harder you chase, the more it escapes. But when you create the right conditions, when you become the garden rather than the hunter, the butterfly comes willingly. This is not passivity, but a disciplined reorientation of energy. It requires effort, but the effort is directed towards self-development rather than external control. The paradox is clear: what is truly yours cannot be forced, but it also cannot be received without preparation. Your task is not to push harder against the current, but to cultivate the psychological readiness to recognize and sustain what life brings. Waiting is one of the most misunderstood aspects of psychological growth. In contemporary culture, waiting is often equated with failure or stagnation. Yet from a psychological perspective, waiting is not an empty pause, but a crucial stage of transformation. Jung described this process as alchemical. Just as base metals must endure fire to be transformed into gold, the human psyche must endure moments of emptiness, silence, and uncertainty before becoming capable of integrating new experiences. This perspective reframes the frustration many individuals feel when their efforts seem fruitless. You may believe you are behind in life, that others are achieving faster, that your timeline has been disrupted. But comparison is a distortion. Each psyche, Jung argued, has its own inner clock, its own symbolic calendar. In behavioral science, this is consistent with the concept of individual differences. No two people develop resilience, self-regulation, or readiness at the same pace. To measure yourself by someone else's trajectory is to deny the unique rhythm of your own individuation process. The metaphor of the river captures this reality. Life is a current that never ceases to flow. Sometimes it carries debris and obstacles, other times it appears slow and stagnant. But beneath the surface, the current continues to move forward. Attempts to force the river to push against its flow only exhaust you. A more strategic approach is to learn how to recognize its direction and allow it to carry you. This does not mean surrendering responsibility. Rather, it means aligning your actions with the broader psychological and existential currents shaping your path. Consider the mechanism of projection, another core Jungian insight. Projection occurs when you attribute to others what you cannot yet acknowledge in yourself. This is why individuals often pursue partners who undervalue them, or chase careers that ultimately leave them empty. The external pursuit mirrors an unresolved internal conflict. In clinical practice, projections are not simply illusions, but opportunities they show you what remains unconscious. The mistake is to confuse the projection with destiny. When you withdraw projections and integrate them, you free yourself from repeating patterns and open space for synchronicity to operate. The story of Elena is not an isolated anecdote, but a psychological pattern, observable across diverse contexts. Take, for instance, career development. Many individuals chase professional paths based on external validation, prestige, income approval from family or society. Yet these pursuits often collapse under the weight of misalignment. When individuals step back, reflect on their authentic interests, and confront the fears that previously drove their choices, they frequently encounter unexpected opportunities. These are not accidents. They are the psyche's response to inner reorientation. It is therefore crucial to distinguish between anxiety-driven pursuit and aligned preparation. The former drains energy and reinforces unconscious fears. The latter channels energy into self-examination, skill building, and resilience, which in turn increase your readiness to receive what is truly yours. From a behavioral strategy perspective, this distinction is vital. Energy invested in alignment multiplies over time, while energy spent on control diminishes both capacity and clarity. The key message is this: the waiting is not passive. It is the active discipline of preparing yourself emotionally and psychologically for what is already moving toward you. The life you desire is not denied to you. It is shaping itself in parallel with your inner readiness to sustain it. To deepen this understanding, we must address the role of loss and uncertainty. Human beings often experience profound anxiety when confronted with endings, a failed relationship, a collapsed business, the loss of an opportunity once considered vital. Yet from a psychological lens, loss is not merely deprivation, it is often preparation. Jung emphasized that illumination does not come by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. In other words, personal growth is less about accumulation and more about integration, about facing the very shadows we attempt to avoid. When life strips something away, it frequently creates the necessary void into which new meaning can emerge. Consider how grief operates. At first, it feels unbearable. But grief has a dual role. It forces acknowledgement of absence, and it simultaneously reorganizes the psyche to accommodate transformation. Behavioral psychology confirms this. Post-traumatic growth studies consistently show that individuals often report increased resilience, deeper relationships, and stronger personal values after loss. These gains do not negate the pain, but reveal its transformative potential. Thus, what appears as loss may in fact be the hidden architecture of synchronicity preparing you for alignment. A powerful metaphor is the image of carrying a backpack full of stones. Every stone represents unresolved guilt, resentment, or expectation. You long for peace, yet the weight prevents progress. The destination, a lake of clarity and rest, is already waiting. The only obstacle is the burden you refuse to release. In strategic terms, this means that your progress is not limited by the external world, but by your internal capacity to let go. Releasing these psychological weights is not indulgence, it is efficiency. It increases your ability to respond flexibly to opportunities as they emerge. Projections also play a role here. What you chase with desperation often represents an unresolved inner wound. For example, when someone continually pursues relationships with emotionally unavailable partners, it is not chance, it is projection. The individual externalizes an unhealed belief: I am unworthy of consistent love. Until that belief is integrated, external pursuits will continue to reinforce the wound. The moment the projection is withdrawn, the dynamic shifts. Suddenly, new relationships appear possible not because the world changed, but because the lens through which the world is perceived transformed. Real-world illustrations make this principle tangible. Take the story of Lucia, a woman who dreamed of publishing a book. For years, she faced rejection, each refusal deepening her sense of invisibility. From one perspective, this was failure. From another, it was incubation. During those years of denial, Lucia refined her craft, clarified her voice, and built resilience. When an editor finally embraced her work, the timing was perfect. She had become the version of herself capable of sustaining the opportunity. The earlier rejections were not detours, but safeguards, ensuring that what was truly hers would not arrive before she was ready to hold it. This is the paradox of destiny. What is for you may not arrive when you demand it, but it will arrive when you are psychologically prepared to sustain it. The strategic task is not to rush, but to cultivate readiness. At the core of Jung's psychology is the concept of individuation, the lifelong process of becoming whole by integrating all aspects of the self, both conscious and unconscious. Many people mistakenly assume that achieving their destiny requires becoming someone entirely different. In truth, individuation is not transformation into another identity, but the courage to embody what you already are at the deepest level. This is where synchronicity reveals its power. Life aligns with you, not when you construct a false persona, but when you live in authenticity. This principle explains why forcing outcomes often leads to exhaustion. When you chase recognition, love, or opportunity by wearing masks, you may achieve temporary success, but it will never feel sustainable. The psyche rebels against inauthenticity. Jung observed that what you repress will eventually dominate you. If you deny vulnerability, life will confront you with relationships that demand openness. If you deny ambition, you may find yourself trapped in mediocrity. If you deny the need for self-worth, you will continually attract situations that devalue you. The unconscious insists on balance, and life has a way of exposing whatever you neglect. Stories illustrate this dynamic vividly. Mariana, for example, spent years in jobs that suffocated her creativity. She blamed external circumstances, but in therapy, she realized that her fear of rejection kept her from pursuing environments where she could shine. Once she confronted that shadow, the fear instilled in childhood that visibility was dangerous, her circumstances shifted. She began rejecting positions that diminished her and instead created projects that showcased her talents. Soon, opportunities aligned. The outer world responded to the inner change. What had always been hers became accessible only once she held the key to her own shadow. This is not mystical thinking. It is a psychological strategy. Behavioral research confirms that individuals who adopt an internal locus of controls, believing that outcomes depend largely on their own choices and inner resources, experience higher resilience and achievement than those who attribute everything to external forces. By taking responsibility for your inner alignment, you increase the probability that external circumstances will match. In this sense, destiny is less about waiting for the right door to open and more about becoming the person who holds the right key. Another important distinction is between what is authentic and what is merely a lesson. Many experiences enter our lives not because they are meant to stay, but because they are meant to teach. A relationship that ends in betrayal, a job that collapses unexpectedly, or a friendship that dissolves painfully, all may feel like cruel detours. Yet from the perspective of individuation, these are initiations. They expose unintegrated parts of the self, forcing us to grow stronger, clearer, and more self-aware. What is truly ours will never require us to diminish ourselves or betray our essence. It will challenge us, yes, but it will also expand us. The signature of authenticity is peace, not desperation. Thus, the path forward is not frantic pursuit, but deep listening. Your unconscious is always sending signals through dreams, intuitions, synchronicities. By paying attention, you align your choices with your deeper truth, and life responds in kind. At this point, the central truth should be clear. What is meant for you will not require self-betrayal. It will not demand that you silence your authenticity or live in constant anxiety. Instead, it will resonate with your deeper identity, and when it arrives, it will feel like recognition rather than conquest. The task, therefore, is not control, but preparation, learning to listen to your unconscious, integrating your shadow, and allowing synchronicity to operate as the silent architect of your life. This does not mean you abandon effort. On the contrary, it means you redirect effort toward inner alignment rather than external manipulation. Imagine a lighthouse. The lighthouse does not chase ships. It does not plead or force. It stands firm, shining its light, and those ships that are meant to find it inevitably do. The same principle applies to you. When you commit to cultivating clarity, resilience, and authenticity, you become magnetic to the opportunities and relationships that are truly yours. Every closed door, every delay, every silence along the way is not evidence of failure, but of timing. Life protects you from what you are not ready to sustain. The patience required may feel excruciating, but it is a discipline of trust. As Jung reminded us, the unconscious always seeks expression. What vibrates within you will eventually manifest, if not in the form you imagine, then in the form you need. So the invitation is simple, yet demanding. Stop measuring your worth by speed or comparison. Trust the rhythm of your own soul. What is for you is already moving toward you. Your responsibility is to prepare to align and to remain faithful to your truth. Because when it arrives, and it will, you will know with absolute certainty that it was always yours.